Welcome to the Biotech Startups podcast by Exceeder. Join us as we speak with first-time founders, serial entrepreneurs, and experienced investors about the challenges and triumphs of running a biotech startup, from pre-seed to IPO, with your host, Jon Chee. In our last episode, we spoke with eMalick Njie about his move from Boston to Florida, the cultural differences he experienced, and how the move revitalized his passion for research. We also heard about his Ph.D. work at the University of Florida, his focus on the cellular and genetic causes of Alzheimer's disease, and his insights into the critical role of microglial cells, and his experiments with stem cells and plaque-busting proteins. If you missed it, be sure to go back and give part 2 a listen. In part 3, we talk with eMalick about founding Genetic Intelligence and its mission to combine AI and genetics to tackle diseases. He recalls the challenges of founding a company, the personal sacrifices he made, and the eventual breakthroughs that earned recognition from the National Science Foundation. eMalick also reflects on how company culture and leadership shifts led him to part ways with Genetic Intelligence, sharing the lessons he learned from his journey and the importance of building teams aligned with the original vision.
Okay, so now you're like, okay, I can't close this door anymore, and you're founding Genetic Intelligence. Can you talk a little bit about Genetic Intelligence mission and focus, and what were the early days like for you as the founding CEO?
Yeah, absolutely. So remember the whole thing about name and genes is very sort of utilitarian, like they got 3 letters. Right? So Genetic Intelligence, let's put this together.
There we go. Yeah,
genetics.
Very C elegance. Very C elegance of you.
It's so utilitarian. And it's the second name that age as well, in retrospect. So, I mean, starting Genetic Intelligence, I would say it was the hardest thing I've ever done, by like a large exponent, by an exponent. I'm doing a reasonable. I don't think I'm like super great in the lab, but I'm set pretty well to lead a future lab as a professor, studying in sheep. Man, these genes are so many for the rest of my life. And I was taking a hard turn, to exploring what we could do with AI and genetics, without much support. So AI was something that was not popular at the time. It was actually considered like there's multiple AI winters there, so it was considered like a graveyard. Luckily, I didn't notice.
Yeah, sometimes that's all you need.
Yeah, I didn't notice. But I remember going into Columbia Technology Ventures office with this idea for a patent, and I was so nervous walking into that office. And now I realize that I walked into that office with the biggest bag of gold I has probably ever walked into that office. But I was so nervous, and like there was not confidence that was from what I was doing. I was just sort of naturally like trying to pretend I'm confident. And then moving, like telling Marty that I'm leaving the lab is one of the hardest things I've ever done. And we still chat about it now. Like I spoke with him in person last summer. I think we're still going through the trauma of me, myself, to be honest, because it was actually such a wonderful experience. And I also had no money.
Nice.
I literally had no money. So I took out my 401k, the retirement plan, and that gave me about $10,000 because they punish you heavily for withdrawing it before you're 65 years old.
Yep.
And I basically funded it by eating less. I'm not even joking. So I went into this. So Movie 300 is a good reference again. I went into this space where I was waking up at 4 a.m. every morning, going for jogs, which I'm doing now again, but back then it was new to me because I'm the Latin morning person. I had to shift that. And I'll go to the supermarket and I go to the vegetable aisles and I'll look for the like broccoli and all of lettuces and so forth. And I'll look at the weight per pound, so price per pound or price, per LB. And just whatever's the cheapest thing is called lunch and dinner, man. Right.
Yep. By the way, again, you're not alone in this. So Exceder was the same way. So we're a weird company because I was a bench scientist and I didn't know better. But we haven't taken outside money ever. And so all I knew was that like we need to bring value to the customers so I can earn the right to pay myself. Obviously, I was talking about it earlier. When you have 0 customers, there's no money to pay yourself. And so we would do the same thing, like early days. I remember going into Safeway and really scouring what is the cheapest thing that we can stretch here. It was the frozen aisle.
Oh, nice.
The frozen aisle, frozen vegetables too. So like, look, I wasn't completely just like going off the rails, but like, and we were able to make like, really, it's like knowing what rock bottom is. And again, I'm speaking for myself now, but like knowing, and this is like a long time ago, but like I still remember it sitting to me today, like figuring out what rock bottom was. And it was hard, but still had a blast. And part of that's incredible is that, when we're thinking about what is the bar to happiness, it's not much. It's not much because I was trying to make, $15 a day stretch. So, and me and my wife were still having a blast, enjoying each other and building Exceder. So I know exactly that feeling because the first piece of equipment that we bought was from my life savings, tapping 401k. So, and that was just one instrument for one client. It was a flash chromatograph.
Nice.
I'm doing this. It was like a medicinal chemistry lab. And I was like, holy crap. This could have this is all all in. But again, I didn't know better. Kind of like exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I didn't know better. I was like, it's gonna
There's
work
like an innocence to that, right? That it's powerful. Right.
It's gonna work out. And it could have very much not worked out. It could have been very, very bad. And that's kind of like entrepreneurship, really.
That is, yeah.
And so, sorry, I didn't mean to bogart your story there.
No, this is actually what helps me move along every day. Like you sharing that experience with me at a Safeway, learning, hacking the Safeway to find that, or exploring the Safeway to find a hack of the frozen aisle. We are kindred spirits in that, and that literally motivates.
It was frozen vegetables, cans of beans for protein and fiber, and a protein if we can afford it. That was years of doing that.
Yeah.
And so those are the roots and the kind of foundational things. I still don't forget it at all.
It's so important, and it teaches you to be to appreciate everything that's come subsequently, but to always be capable of being lean, which we're going to get into Ecotone. I'll share some of those lessons about that leanness from that period that allows it to be a very no saturated fats operation.
Yes.
It's and that's where values created. But yeah, so I just by being very frugal and sort of this dogged determination that we have this thing called a universal approximator. The patents that I wrote, it's in the first lines, end up being 2 of them. The first lines are universal approximator, and it's so true, right? Which is why every industry is being impacted by AI today. So the vision of genetic intelligence was to explore the use of artificial intelligence within genetics, right? And would impact, of course, to different diseases. So I shined a light a lot on Alzheimer's disease, but again, universal approximator was pasted everywhere, right? And what we did was start following up on what I was doing in the laboratory, start putting now human genomes, like I see elegance genomes, but human genomes in convolutional neural nets. Can convolutional neural nets accept genetic data? That was an open question, right? Can they take some of it? Can they take all of it? What can you do if any of these things occur? So I would say one of the most wonderful things about genetic intelligence is I believe to this, at least to my knowledge, that we are the first to put an entire human whole genome within a convolutional neural net. This is very forward thinking, and we got rewarded with the National Science Foundation giving us an award for the ideation of this and the execution of it. And so money started to pour, sort of slowly trickle in and pour in, and eventually several $1 million in the bank. And was some absurd, to me at the time, it was like absurd valuation. But it was like hard, work every step, convincing people of artificial intelligence was harder than convincing them of so many other things, which is so now, I don't have to even do
now
that.
you're just now it's getting pulled from you, but I can't imagine this is pre-chat GPT, where no one has any idea.
Exactly. But it was a momentum that I saw, if there's so these larger shifts that occur, and think of sort of baseline things, going to a stadium, a busy stadium, there's a movement of people in it, right? So if you just zoom out, this is this big shift of movement in, right? And no one individual responsible, it's a collection. It's so even if you're a laggard, you eventually will. It's a movement. And then at the end of the game, there's a movement out. It's just this larger movement that's happening. So even if I'm telling you that there's going to be a movement out and you there's no movement out, it's just a matter of time before I see
you are going to experience it.
Right.
Yeah, you're going to experience it.
Exactly. You're going to experience it. So I just knew it was just time. And we luckily had enough early investors that saw this movement for us to be able to chug along and do some interesting things. And then of course now we're seeing that movement really take hold today.
Very interesting. And I'm thinking about that experience that you mentioned, going to the Columbia patent/tech transfer. And was it just you, or did you have other comrades and co-founders who were let's do this thing? Did you kick this whole genetic intelligence off just solo dolo?
Yeah, at the first year and a half, it was just me. It was. I mean, I'll be honest, it was very lonely. I remember going to the Tech Ventures office by myself. I remember going to the Low Library, which is Columbia has just people that stamp, give you official stamp that, so I could send the company to the government, I could do a business as to LO or something like that. It was just a vision, and I was just sharing it with people, but I didn't know any venture capitalists. Columbia doesn't, much better now, but at the time, they didn't have the same spirit as Stanford. So I went to the computer science department multiple times to talk to people about AI, and they really weren't into it then, right?
So again, you're not alone. I was at a dining room table. I didn't know any investors at that time, which is part of the reason why I was well, if an investor is not going to pay this salary, I need to find it somewhere else. And so bring value to customers. But I think that's something too I'd like to underline, is that you might hear about entrepreneurship in the media. It's this glitz, glam, kind of just super, just exuberant kind of thing. But I think a lot of the time it is lonely. And especially those early days. And for me, I've never done sales before. So, but I was told it was you just gotta pick up the phone. So tried my hand at years of just cold calling, trying to garner some business. And that first piece of equipment was off a cold call. And the timing was perfect, but it it is brutal. It is super brutal. But again, I think we're all stronger for it. Like it's kind of like going monk mode or like hermit mode.
Yep.
Or if it, go to Dragon Ball Z, it's like the hyperbolic time chamber. You increase the gravity like 10, 100x, and you're just like doing push-ups. That's me cold calling. But in Dragon Ball Z, you're just doing one-handed push-ups.
Exactly.
For what seems like an eternity. And then you leave and you're like, oh, ChatGPT. So like for me, it's like, oh, people are starting to get it. And from our perspective, you're at the frontier, right? Like AI is like very much more frontier than what we're doing. Like, right, but you
hit it on a nail. I like the Dragon Z analogy. It's, I told you how I converted from being a late night person to waking up at 4 a.m. like Dragon Z, man.
Exactly. Adult Swim and Toonami. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so for me, like for what was super confusing for me is Exceeder. So we provide lab equipment leasing. Leasing as a concept is an age-old industry. Like everyone's like leased an apartment at one point in time, probably. Hopefully, probably there's a majority. So people are familiar with it in that regard. And other industries, we're talking about like applicable to other industries and business models. Leasing is used like commercial real estate, leasing a car, like it's everywhere. It's pervasive, and it's been here since the dawn of time. So when I first started Exceeder, when those first few, and still to this day, by the way, like it is more, there's more knowledge around it now, but people are like, what the heck is leasing? I'm like, hold on, wait a second. Have you rented an apartment before? Like maybe, or is there, or something, or maybe a friend has rented an apartment before. But for you, I can kind of empathize with the kind of just like trying. And so kind of exactly what you said, like there is this motion. If you zoom out, people are going to experience it eventually. I just don't know when. I don't know when the game, this now, I don't know, this is where maybe the proverbial game example kind of ends here, but like, I don't know when this movement is going to happen, but I know it will, because I've seen it, how it can be beneficial elsewhere. And so I empathize with that, where it's just like,
also, the thing you're saying with a leasing, it's sort of like a paradigm shift in people's mentality, and they need like some time for some cognitive dissonance to resolve itself.
Yes,
right? They just and that's called time.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. It's time, because I'm trying my best to explain it, but sometimes you just need time for you to, or the community or whatever, this movement to catch hold.
Yeah. So, and it's also, so you literally give immediate value, but it takes them time to recognize that value. It's like a latent period before they recognize it. And they're like, why didn't I do that before? Right?
Yes, that's exactly it. And I always think about kind of like that normal curve distribution where you have like early adopters, like middle adopters, and late adopters. Yeah. And, I think there are I continue to have conversations with people who are the early adopters, and they just like quickly got it. But now we're kind of in this realm where we're in the kind of the bulk of the normal curve, where people like, oh crap, like my first venture, I did it. I wish I did that during my first venture, but like, here's another go. Second venture, let's do it this way. And you kind of learn, and typically it's via like lived experience, where you're like, oh crap, I could have done it a different way, and I want another shot at it. So yeah, I'm sorry, I'm now derailing us a little bit here, but so now early days, it was you, it was, it was hard shit. It was hard shit, but you then started to get you started getting grant funding and got investor attention. Is that when the team started to grow and you started to kind of, I mean, I'm going to imagine you're founding CEO. It's not just like the technical like component of this. There's like the whole company building and everything to that. Can you talk about that?
Exactly. So yeah, you have to build a company around the vision. And so with enough time, I was able to get the interest of a good friend of mine that was also at Columbia with me. Name is Bertrand Adave. So Bertrand was in the chemistry department, which is, I would say, a 3-minute walk from my building in biological sciences. And we had known each other, and he had finished up his Ph.D. and then went on to McKinsey & Company as a consultant, which that combination of one, having like a PhD in one of the hard sciences, and two, having business experience was something that I valued. So I told him about this crazy idea, literally over a napkin.
Very startup. Very startup. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I was like, so I want you to leave your high pay and fancy job and come slug it out with me. This is going to change your life. Think about it.
He's like, what?
So he did. He went and plugged in all the numbers using McKinsey software and all that stuff. And
Yeah. As they do.
You saw that this was something up the horizon. And it wasn't just my word. He went and researched, and he came on at first as like a business assistant, and then eventually things were really moving along. We had gotten some more people, and I wanted the development cycle to just accelerate, put an exponent on it as much as possible. So he was like, let have him become the CEO, and then I could focus more on the code base and the bills, which worked out for what we were doing. We were able to attract some more investment, and then I was able to put leaders into getting the genome into the CarbNet and just build different versions of CarbNets to explore what they could do. And the team just started to grow, which has positives and negatives, which if you want to, I could get into on that.
I am interested, because I think a lot of companies are at that inflection point.
Yeah. Oftentimes we are propelled by what you're supposed to look like versus what's best for your business. So having like a big office is something that people look at as like an indicator of success. Having a lot of people is like an indicator of success. Having origins such as like a car garage, like a Google founders, was the indicator of success. But you have to remember, before those guys built their business out of a car garage, that was looked at as like an indicator of fail. Right.
Yep.
So we were innovative in the sense that we just had the company be completely from home. From 2000, this was 2016, so way before the pandemic. And that was looked as like an indicator of fail. Right. What are you gonna do? So we stuck to our guns. And eventually
I want to just like, before you move on to the next one, again, you're not alone. During that cold call like flurry that I was doing, so I talked about the win, but I still am scarred today because I won't name the company and I won't name this institutional investor, but they picked up the phone and basically berated me on the phone for being there. You sound like a one-person shop. Do you even have an office? And this was before work from home was cool.
Yeah.
And so I was getting chewed out for even daring call them and not having like being in a skyscraper. And to this day, just like scarred.
Yeah. That's such a terrible thing to do. And yeah.
Totally okay. Totally you live and you live and you learn and you move forward, right? But it definitely exactly what you said. It wasn't cool. I feel like it wasn't cool until it became cool. Now I'm dating myself, but I'm like, oh, like those like really baggy pants that I used to wear, like they're now cool, but I used to get made fun of for wearing those baggy pants. Anyways, now I'm dating myself. But sorry, you're not alone in that. I definitely
thank you for sharing. Yeah. It's so true. It's like those individuals that exist for, sort of bullies. They're certainly not usually starting things on their own, and they love to give opinions. So yeah, we stuck to our guns and that. And certainly it wasn't cool. A lot of my folks back at Columbia were like, "What is eMalick doing?" Like, it's I've talked to them recently, and they were like, "We thought you were crazy." I was like, "I was crazy."
No.
I was crazy.
Still crazy. Yeah.
That was called the right crazy that you should have been too.
Yeah, exactly. You should have just come along. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we built a company. So eventually, eventually, I don't know, it's like 15 people, 20 people within different levels of like employment status to advisorship. I sort of started to lose track of what the heck is going on in my company. So I'm gonna now just quickly go to the down phase of genetic intelligence. So while we were busy not being cool, like doing work from office, but still like having this vision of the world that was the correct vision, we didn't know that we were the first like modern AI company out of Colombia. Right. There was another company, I think in 2012 or 11. So these companies are based on like a different generation of AI. They're not using neural nets, like in like back propagation, having neural nets the way we understand them to be today. So we were like the first modern AI. On my LinkedIn, I have medical company, but it's actually companies in general, right? And so we got traction eventually, particularly after the National Science Foundation Award. And I had given Bertrand the CEO position, which worked for a while, but then didn't work after a while. Just long story short, the people that I started to see within the company just didn't share the ethos and the vision that I had set out for the company. That vision being, how can we really hit a high note on exploring genetics within artificial intelligence systems with like a focus on disease to make it relevant today, right? It became more of a consultant energy that I didn't find to be the most comfortable for me to be. And by the time I was like, this is too bad that I have to start changing it, it was essentially too late. So listen to entrepreneurs, not only build your team, but make sure you always have your team aligned to your vision. This is just key. So in your hires, you have to always sort of, do the pinch test to make sure that they are aligned there. And if they're not, do not be hesitant in letting change in staff. It's simple as that. This is a boat that you're building. It's super important. And if it goes the wrong direction, you and them will be hurt. So it's important for you to have the right people on board. So when I realized that this was I was essentially outnumbered. Long story short, I had developed some tools that allowed us to look at the heritages of different people for the purpose of being able to separate disease group individuals without having the heritages confused downstream processing in basically prevent hallucinations down the line in a neural net. But the desire of some other groups within the company to monetize this immediately to try to become a 23andMe was very strong. And I didn't build genetic intelligence to be a 23andMe competitor. I built it for us to do much different ambitions. And I just couldn't change it. Despite everything that I tried, I just didn't have this strength, and I hadn't done the background to basically ensure everybody was on my side the entire time because I was so busy writing the code. So I cut my losses and sold my shares and left the company to start anew.
And so there's a bunch of things that I kind of want to kind of touch on. So your comment about like culture, being intentional, and really like being intentional with your hires is, I think, incredibly important, because I think sometimes it's exactly what you said, like a lot of in the business media, having a fancy building with a fancy address with the highest headcount and the largest funding looks great on the service level, but it can be incredibly nefarious if that's what you're optimizing for, because hires are much like a lot of things are. Culture is all people and culture, are compounding. And you think just one hire that's maybe not exactly a fit is okay. And when I say fit, everyone has a fit, like the company fit. We have Exceeder, we have the Exceeder way of doing things. I'm not telling anyone that the Exceeder culture should be your culture. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying for whatever culture that you are seeking out to build, like not following your kind of your principle on it and you're finding that alignment is actually what starts to create this like negative compounding effect where the culture compounds in the wrong direction, because that person changes the culture. When the culture changes, you hire your next person you hire just a little bit more off, and then a little bit more off for every successive hire. And then at that point, you don't recognize the company that you originally founded.
Exactly.
And the problem, I think, when I saw in like 2020, 2021, is that everyone was optimizing for those surface level things at great speed, right? And now we're dealing with the indigestion of it, right? And I know you, like, it's great to make these grand announcements. Like, it feels great, but like, if you just take a longer view horizon on it, just really think long and hard. What does this mean for like 5-year, insert your company, 10-year, insert your company here? And people, like the people stuff is the people stuff is the hardest to change too, because people are involved, and there's a lot of, it's an emotional decision. And so I think that's really important for anyone who's listening out there, that just think long and hard. Just think long and hard about those hires, because it's not just that in isolation. It is
the compounding effect. It's the compounding. It's an exponential that destroys a company. Or it could cause immense strife, or if you do it the right way, you could also build the place you want to be at.
Yeah, and that's the flip, right? You live by the sword or you die by the sword. Like, it's if you get it right, that's when super magic happens, right?
Yeah.
And I think we always have that, like, hiring slow rather than fast for us has always been the key. And we're, from at least for Exceeder's perspective, and again, we're just a weirdo company. Like, our idea for hiring at Exceeder is that we would love every hire to come in to want to spend their whole career here, like from now till they stop working. And that is super weird. Like, and I take great inspiration. I talk about visiting Japan, all this stuff all the time, but the companies that are in Japan, like, in Japan has like a disproportionate amount of businesses that are 100 years old. I think they have like 65% of all 100-plus-year-old businesses.
Wow.
And it's a weird, it's kind of a weird dynamic, but I take great inspiration in that, because when I think about long time horizons like that, it's like, what are the cool things that can be done when you are not worried about whatever it may be? And this is why I don't think we'd ever go public. This is like the pressures of this short-termism. And again, I'm preaching for Jon here, and I'm preaching.
No, it makes complete sense. Looking seen over the horizon is key. Like, those initial visions that they found that could last way past your lifetime.
Exactly.
So you have to not be afraid to change people to the right people as quickly as possible, always without regret. Because again, it could literally last way past your lifetime.
Yeah, and also too, I think another thing that you said that was incredibly important is that you are doing yourself a disfavor and that other person a disfavor.
Yeah.
Like, it is not fair to them, right? It's like, because they don't deserve to have that, tension. Like, like, everyone wants to be in an organization where you find alignment. So just pretending like there is alignment that's the disservice there. And it's actually, you're doing the favor by being like, hey, it's not a good fit, but I will help you. I'll help you find a fit. It's just not here. And that's okay. And
there's another boat somewhere else, right?
There's another boat. There's tons of boats. Like, there's tons of boats, like, everywhere. And we will help you. It's not a fit here, but I will do my best to help you find that boat. And it's it's not a knock against you. It's just like, hey, look, we're doing something weird and different here. And, we don't want any of that heartache. We don't want to discover this heartache later. Let's figure it out now. So, okay, I'm going to get off my soapbox for a moment. So now you're like, okay, I need to go in my own direction here. Can you talk a little bit about what was next after genetic intelligence?
Yeah, so I'm gonna shape this one in sort of as terse language as possible. I had sort of two forts, like outward facing me and like a inner facing me. So leaving genetic intelligence, full of my shares, the most difficult sort of experience. I don't wish that upon anybody, but I did it successfully. And I had more zeros in my bank account than I've ever had.
Yeah, a little bit different now.
So, and I had more zeros, and I was exhausted, and I was sick of dealing with any people within the healthcare space, just because of the experience with genetic intelligence. So I needed like a break. I formed this company called NeuroStorm, where we explored the frontier of technology and medicine. Long story short, I put like a pretty amazing team. And we worked together with Cornell University's Department of Surgery to explore different applications to help with Parkinson's disease, which ended up resulting in like a preclinical trial with people here in New York City that we published. And actually it was pretty successful in that sense, but NeuroStorm itself never took off. Right? And so again, to anyone that's listening and trying to be an entrepreneur, most things you do are not going to work out. And my example is NeuroStorm. But in the course of that, a friend of mine, her name is Anurupa. She's this visionary MIT engineer, has done, was already like pretty successful as like a teacher. She went to, it's like a dean of like physics, I believe, at one of the academies here. Came to me, and it's like some of the technologies that you've been working with in NeuroStorm, particularly virtual reality, could be really helpful for this idea that I have in bringing education into three-dimensional space. And we could use some artificial intelligence to make this make more sense and be more useful for learning. So this is completely outside of my space, but I was like, that's such a vision. Actually, we'll help you out on this. Also, I was motivated by when I was in graduate school, was studying brains, like literally physical brains that were cut into these different slices. Like it's like just meat all on, like, put on a table, and you go study it. You just thought we could do better.
Yeah.
It smelled really bad, and it just looked terrible. And I wanted to move us forward into the future, and this is my opportunity to have impact on the educational system. So Anurupa, like would come to my office, or would come right here to this living room, also her place, and shop the company and build it out. And eventually, it was strong enough that she went up on her own, and the company, like now Prisms is in, I think at least like 40 to 45 different states, and hundreds of school districts across these states. So it's not, and Andreessen Horowitz funded. So that was like a stunning success.
Cool.
But it came out of the fail of NeuroStorm.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I was going to say for listeners out there too, it's these quote unquote failures. It's all accretive. It's all a lesson, right?
Yeah.
It's all a lesson if you're willing to make it a lesson, right?
Absolutely.
I think a lot of the time, you get whatever, you're dealt a failure, it doesn't work out the way you want it. And you don't, you basically, of course, take time to mourn it. Like for sure, mourn is like a painful as hell experience, but there's always something that you can take away from it for your next, whatever your next thing might be. But if you let it just all consume you and wallow and mourn it forever and just not take away any of the lessons, that's when that's when it's like becomes problematic. But if you don't, of course, take the time to mourn, but also see what is the kind of the silver lining to it. Because like, look at this, Prisms of Reality came out of this. Exactly. Yeah. Right. And
Absolutely.
that like, right. But if you could have easily just let it, just like pound you into the ground and just like, I just give up. So I think a lot of the time entrepreneurship, and again, this sounds like trite and super just cliche, but a lot of it is just like gritty, not giving up.
Yeah, exactly. It's resilience. It's resilience, and it shows that you're trying. That's how I look at it, right? That's my silver lining. It's like if you don't have any fails, that means you really didn't try hard enough, right?
Yep.
So you're not exploring the boundary space, right?
Exactly. And I think I was speaking to Nathan Clark, who is he's the founder of Ganymede, and he was talking about something about it's like there is no kind of like silver bullet or just like insight here that's all too special. It's just like there are people who are doing things or not doing things, and I want to be the person that's like doing things, and that ultimately is usually the indicator that things are going to work out. You just have to keep doing, and keep it pushing, just keep moving forward. So, I love that Prisms of Reality came out of this. So
Yeah.
what was after Prisms of Reality?
Well, so actually during NeuroStorm and Prisms of Reality, so that I had this front face and, this company's sort of going forward, but I also had all those zeros in my bank account.
Yep.
So now I could do independent research.
Cool.
Without needing a company or university or anything, because if I want something, I could just pay for it. If I want 30 GPUs spun up.
You won't get flagged by the admin.
No one's going to flag me. No one's going to flag me this time, guys.
Yeah. You won't get flagged.
I'm not going to escape velocity. You can't pull me back, right?
Yeah. That's amazing.
So I actually spent most of my time during like the NeuroStorm and Prisms period looking at AI and genetics in the background. And I call them the hidden period or hidden or latent period, where I just went at like a deep examination of what it would take for us to be able to identify the genes that are causing different diseases. I was very like heliocentric on Alzheimer's and so forth, but then that period moved me towards rare genetic diseases in general, and was also informed. I had time to process what occurred at Columbia. Us given these rescue experiments, injecting these animals with the correct versions of genes, and then having these animals sort of move from being from a sick state to a healed state. And we weren't just doing it with just some disease, we were doing it with all different types of ailments. And it's like, what is the parallel here? Rare genetic diseases, right? There's about 10,000 of these diseases that affect 1 in 8 human beings, so like 1 billion people across the world. And so I went into this deep dive onto some of the experiments and how we discovered those genes at Columbia to see how we could move that in humans. And again, the answers is like AI. You need to use AI to be able to process this amount of data, right? But the AI itself, you just cannot make like a transformer and it will do it. It has to have some sort of framework that allows you to repeat what we were doing in C. elegans within a much more complex, high-dimensional human genome space. So I got into different like groups of studies that I wasn't exposed to before. So one that really sticks in my mind is coalescent theory. Coalescent theory is just looking at the movement of genes through populations. Like a good example would be, I use a blue-eyed, green-eyed gene. Denmark, Swedish, like blue. One of them is blue-eyed, the other one's green-eyed. And then you have two people that lived there 1,000 years ago. And then one person got to migrate out of that space and move to Italy. But everybody in Italy has brown eyes, right? How long will it take for a Danish or a Scandinavian person to have a kid with an Italian person? How many kids do they need to have for them to have, the blue-eyed, green-eyed gene show up in a population? Because that's like Mendelian genetics, right? And then, but can you describe that spread across the population over multiple generations? Right? So, like a really esteemed researchers studying birds and looking at the movement of genes across bird populations over time. There's folks that are doing it with people and just looking at general features in people across time. But there's also with diseases, just looking at like a particular genetic element and have examined its movement across time. So the Alzheimer's gene, for instance, you could track the Alzheimer's gene from 1,100 years ago in like a particular family, and then look at the family records all the way until today and see those individuals are now distributed in 5 different continents, but all have the same change in the gene that causes their version of Alzheimer's, right? But these techniques are all wonderful, but they haven't taken over because they've like very manual. They exist in like a very low dimensional space. There's no doing any of this at scale, right? There's no doing it at scale. This is why AI is needed for us to be able to discover genes across different ailments. AI systems, by definition, look at multidimensional spaces in a nonlinear way, right? The human genome is multidimensional and it's nonlinear. We tend to think of genes as like 5' to 3'. Or,
yeah. In the textbook. Yeah,
in the textbooks. And I like from my direct like experience in the lab, it's you have like this part of the genome called a gene, and it's being impacted by things in front of it as well as on the other side of it. So it's quite multidimensional. And AI systems excel at problems such as this, right? And during that hidden period, where I'm just blasting away my GPU as much as possible, it's such a wonderful freedom to have,
Yeah.
I also started to see that something that, it started a dovetail into today, that like AI systems, when designed the right way, could start looking at the human genome as a first language. What do I mean by that? So a first language is like, we speak English right now. And a second language or a third language could be, like I hear Spanish all the time, but I could say maybe a few words in it, but I'm not really fluent in it, but I understand that the language is being spoken, and I could dice apart, or somebody's cursing at me, I get that pretty quickly. But like a first language is something you sort of intuitive, you don't have to think through the word, you just get it, right? Today we operate with the human genome, we cognitively see it or absorb it as like a third language. The experiments we do are all third language experiments. For instance, to discover genes in the laboratory, my group, as well as all others in the world, would design experiments where we essentially randomly mutate the genome at different positions and see the change in the animal's ailments, and assign that gene to that ailment, genotype, phenotype. So we move from that to doing targeted sequencing with CRISPR, but it's the same idea. It's just one by one movement across the genome to try to understand meaning and just assign words to the genome. We don't look at the ATGC code and be like, we get that. That just means that. We just don't, right? We can't. We don't. We haven't evolved to that level of intuition.
Yeah.
Right. So what I saw during that hidden period was some hints that there's a potential for that to occur using AI systems. So one model that I had, also have to say, all these models created them from the ground up, right? Which is again like Ecotone's ethos, but it was something I was doing at Columbia when I was like pretty junior, learning how to program. So now, so ground up, none of this like what do you call it? Like GPT wrappers. Wonderful companies are going to come out of that, but we design things from the ground up because we have to. We're working with the genetic code, and things have to be custom for that. But yeah, we designed this model that was able to group different heritages from all around the world, without it being given any labels of what those heritages are. Right. So it would understood the difference between Swedish people and Australians, Japanese people and Madagascans, Austrian people and Gambian people, where I'm from, folks from Texas versus folks from Argentina, without giving any labels, just a pure genetic code. Right? In fact, one of the surprise findings of that study was just, again, the pure genetic code, we're able to find a microheritage in Japan. So I had thought, we were talking about Japan earlier, I thought the Japanese, people were just this uniform peoples, right? It's like a Japanese Isles or a group from just basically one people, so Japanese people. But it turns out that Japan the Japan we have today is a result of multiple different migrations of people from mainland China. And the earliest of these is a group called the Ainu people, AINU. And within the AI model that I designed, there's this massive like cluster of, because we use clusters so humans could understand what the AI is thinking. There's this massive cluster of Japanese individuals, and there's this like micro cluster right next to it. And it turns out it's the micro cluster is associated with South Korea, with mainland China, and some of the Pacific, North Pacific islands and so forth. But the model separated these individuals. It's like these are genetically Japanese, but genetically different from most Japanese.
Interesting.
Right. So I was like, okay. Went in and dug deeper. It turns out there's this Ainu people. They were the first wave. They thought of the original settlers of Japan in like North Japan, like Aito. And there's only about 200,000 of them left now. They have their own language, which only like less than 100 people speak today. So it's like an extinct or near extinct language. So all of this cultural information came out of like the findings of the model itself.
Wow. That's trippy. And so as you're like, you're doing this research and, you've created this environment of like creative freedom. You're kind of truly like liberated in that sense. When did you as you're looking forward for it, I know you've been getting active. When did it become from a kind of independent research to I'm going to like turn this into a company?
Yeah, so I was waiting for a few signals. I knew eventually the next company is going to come. I need to sort of recover from the genetic intelligence. Not understate that. I'm my person just as much as anybody else. Two, the pandemic occurred. And we wanted to get out of that phase for fundraising to sort of come back online. And three, there were some limitations within the convolutional nets that like some architectural change needed to occur for them to be able to take even more higher dimensional genomic data. So I recovered mentally and physically. The pandemic changed, and the transformers came online. So I'm not sure how familiar you are with transformers, but they are essentially
for everyone out there who might not be, and I only know it at a very surface level, so I could benefit from learning from you here.
Yeah, absolutely. So the convolutional neural nets were what drove the AI space from 2012 to, I would say, 2020, right around the pandemic. And they have it's a very specific architecture that was first fine-tuned on vision tasks, but it's actually broadly applicable. However, it has a ceiling as to how much information you could put on it, and people certainly tested the heck out of those ceilings. A new type of AI came about, I think 2016, called like generative adversarial network, which again leveled up the playing field a bit, but it also had issues that needed to be overcome. In 2017, a paper came out from, I think it was actually a 2016 paper, came out describing this architecture called a transformer. And then folks at Google, now part of those folks are the co-founders of OpenAI, describe that model in much greater detail in a paper called Attention is All You Need. And they describe basically use this type of data representation called attention framework in an architecture called a transformer. And fundamentally, the issue that they were looking at was how do you have any, like within like a chain of words or a chain of tokens, whichever way you look at it, how do you at any one moment within that chain be able to look back at only what's important behind you So convolutional nets just looked at everything and sort of give it equal weight, while within a transformer network, it's able to sort of be more judicious about what it looks behind, sort of in a look back table, so to speak, right?
Yep.
This is like a very low key definition of.
No. That's exactly how I need it, because like it sounds like that's a massive efficiency gain. Massive.
And this was a game changer, and these things take some time to matriculate into different uses. But around 2020, 2021, the transformers started being used for all sorts of different tasks, from developing GPT-2 to GPT-3, also being adapted for vision tasks. They essentially took the cake of the generative adversarial networks, right? They just did what they were doing with much greater representation and much more robustness. And I am always looking for architectures that could take in more information, because the goal that we have is to put in thousands of genomes within some architecture, right? So remember, first we did that with a single genome in a convolutional neural net, and now we want to do it with thousands of genomes, so that we could get this like understanding of the genomic space as like a first language. So when those three signals occurred, I recovered, pandemics over, transformers came online, Ecotone is ready to be born.
Stars aligning is that you can see it. Very interesting. And so now the timing is like just absolutely just like, it seems like this is like, it's starting to just like everything's like aligned.
That's all for this episode of the Biotech Startups podcast. We hope you enjoyed our discussion with eMalick Njie. Tune in to part 4 of our conversation to learn more about his journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with your friends. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to having you join us again on the Biotech Startups podcast for part 4 of eMalick's story. The Biotech Startups podcast is produced by Exceeder. Don't want to miss an episode? Search for the Biotech Startups podcast wherever you get your podcasts and click subscribe. Exceeder provides research labs with equipment leases on founder-friendly terms to support paths to exceptional outcomes. To learn more, visit our website www.exceeder.com. On behalf of the team here at Exceeder, thanks for listening. The Biotech Startups podcast provides general insights into the life science sector through the experiences of its guests. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from the podcast is at the user's own risk. The views expressed by the participants are their own and are not the views of Exceeder or sponsors. No reference to any product, service, or company in the podcast is an endorsement by Exceeder or its guests.